right, everyone, welcome back to ETalks. This week here at ETalks, we have a very special guest, Dr. Williams from Bergen Community College, who is an associate professor in the communication department, and she teaches both public speaking and interpersonal communication pedagogy. So welcome today, Dr. Williams, and we are very
Thank
honored to have
you.
you here.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation very much. Thank you.
We thank you. So today I think we'll be talking about public speaking, anxiety. So first, how should we approach this and what are your thoughts on it?
Okay, well, I want to start actually with a reference to a television show, which is, I think, a great opening for this. I know probably this audience is a lot younger, but Jerry Seinfeld he's one of my favorite comedians, and his television show that was very popular in the 1990s always started with an opening in one of his comedy clubs. And one of the things he said for one of his jokes was, the number one fear people have is public speaking. Death is number two. Death is number two. That means that if you're at a funeral, you're better off in the casket than delivering the eulogy. And it's funny because I think he's funny, but he's actually right that for decades, every single survey, national survey of American people has shown that the number one fear is public speaking. And
That's very
it doesn't
interesting
change.
compared to death. I usually think
Yeah,
about big fears like drowning, burning, but
right.
public speaking, it's not something very, heard of as in like the top fear, but it is actually pretty common.
Yeah, and the problem is that most college students have got to take this in a required class in college. And even if they don't have to take the required class, they still will probably have to do it as a requirement in one of their classes. And if you don't get experience with this in younger years and just kind of develop the craft and the skill as you go on, it just becomes that much more daunting to accomplish this skill.
Definitely. So, thinking about like younger years, we think about like I think about all the presentations that we were
Mhm.
doing back in school. So back in like middle school, high school, what do you think is the earliest age to get a child or like a teen or youth to
Mm.
start public speaking so that
Well,
they can, custom it more in the future?
right. Well, I would say as young as possible.
Okay.
I would say start very easy with the old standard show and tell. And actually, the research says, and this is very interesting, and I agree with it from raising three sons of my own, that students don't present with the level of communication apprehension, which is what is called in my field. That's the official term. They don't present with it until third grade. Before third grade, it's really not present an identifiable level. But what happens at third grade is that they become more aware of what their peers think of them. They become more aware of their own behavior. So I would say start it in kindergarten. And then I think, and I actually do some workshops with middle school students, and I think ideally that's the perfect age to start. If you're asking me, I'd start them in seventh grade giving speeches.
That's definitely awesome. But then there are people, so I think one of the ways to avoid a very future obstacle about public speaking is starting at an earlier age. But how about if we already have that fear, like I can't go back to seventh grade right now.
Right.
What should I do? What are some tips and tricks?
Right. Well, there's a lot of tips and there's definitely a lot of tricks, but we kind of have to divide it into three major areas, I'd say. Defining what it is, right, and what it isn't, this level of anxiety, communication apprehension, kind of looking at the top and major causes of it, and then go into the treatments and remedies and the tricks.
Definitely. So what are some, what are the very common causes? So one is probably just being the very self-conscious near peers or near anyone that we are maybe, we might be kind of anxious about. But what are some other causes about these?
Right. I'm just trying to get my handout up there, but if I can't, that's
Mhm.
fine. It's behind this tab and it's not opening, but that's right. So I think we have to first kind of define what it is, right? So this research interestingly started in the 1970s, which is kind of intriguing to me because it's really not that long, right, historically, to be researched. And this guy McCruskey is kind of the guru of this research. And he defined it as somebody's fear of level or anxiety associated with either real or anticipated communication. And the key word in that is anticipated. And this is why public speaking anxiety is a super hard thing to beat because you can have anxiety, the stomach churning, the heart racing, the worried thoughts weeks before your speech starts. And what is also intriguing about that definition is that it assumes that people have public speaking anxiety over public speaking, but that's actually not true.
What do you mean?
People, yeah, what's interesting is that when somebody says, I'm scared of public speaking, they're not. They're not. They're scared about other stuff, like forgetting information, which is the number one thing. They're scared about feeling embarrassed in front of their peers. They're afraid of their voice cracking. They're afraid of turning red. They're afraid of their stomach churning and their heart racing. So they're not afraid of public speaking. They're afraid of other things. And I think if you kind of frame it that way, it makes it more manageable just right at the start. Nobody's scared of public speaking. They're just scared of other things. And a big, big word that comes to mind is the word control. We get scared of things we can't control. And
That
that's
is
true of
very
anything. Relationships, and this will save anybody listening a lot of therapy. It's true of relationships, it's true of finances, and it's most definitely true of public speaking. We get scared of things we can't control, and people don't feel in control of remembering information, whether they're going to turn red, whether people are going to laugh at them. So the whole trick is to kind of get control, right? That's my advice to my students. So in order to get control, you have to kind of think of some causes. So I think like there's a whole bunch of causes, right? But I think the number one cause is that it's a new experience.
and people also they're also scared of what they don't know. So
Right.
because it is a new experience, they don't
Exactly.
know what's going to happen, how is it going to go, and I
Right.
think there is
Control.
not much of a way to
Hmm.
predict it either. Anything can happen when you're speaking in front of a whole
That's
crowd.
right. That's right. And I think it's because people just haven't done it. And just think, like when you started high school, oh, you're nervous. Will I meet my friends? And who will I know there? And how will I open my locker? People get nervous when they're driving for the first time. People get nervous when they're starting their first job. So it kind of explains a lot in my view, right? That we just have to look at this like any other new big experience that we're going to be a little nervous. And the second reason I think is that we fear like if we did a speech in the past and it really didn't go well, we think, well, it's just going to happen again. And I think that's probably the second reason for it. I also think that how we're wired kind of affects it with our degree of introversion and extroversion. People who are highly introverted have a more difficult time getting up in front of people than extroverted people do. So if you're just kind of wired in one area of that continuum than the other, it really makes getting up in front of people and talking really, really hard.
But are those introverted people kind of doomed for this fate?
They're
Because
not doomed. No, they're
I'm
not
personally
doomed.
a very
No.
extroverted person and I love speaking in front of crowds. I still get, anxious about, forgetting information, that I just
Yes.
realized. But on the other hand, I'm more of the, one of the comfortable people who actually like loves public speaking. So,
Right.
what can I do for my friends who are introverted? So what can they do?
Well, that kind of brings me then to like some treatments, right? So the first and really obvious one is to practice, but you've got to practice the right things in the right way. If you are scared about forgetting information, which is again the number one fear, then you have got to practice in a certain way. You cannot practice with long pieces of paper with everything written out word for word. You have to have a speaking outline that only contains key phrases and keywords only. And then you only practice with those notes. Because if you try to memorize and memorize and memorize, some people can do that and make it seem natural, but that's really the exception, actually. So you must just rely on just a few keywords and key phrases. But you've also got to remember that the audience usually doesn't have a script in front of them of what you're going to say.
That is a
So,
very, very interesting
yeah,
point. I've never thought about that way because
they
it's
don't.
always so I think it's one of the ways is that we start public speaking in the educational field, like in schools,
Right.
for presentations, and we know that our educator, our teachers, we think that they know everything. And then what we don't know is that all of our peers, they don't have much of an idea
Right.
what we're going to do exactly.
That's right.
So
That's right. And in regards to the audience, I think a lot of people think that the audience is somehow going to have a bad perception of them. But I've been teaching this for over 30 years, and here's what I've seen. When an audience sees a speaker struggle, and we all have seen this, right? When we see a speaker struggle, they feel uncomfortable, they're forgetting information, they're stumbling over their words, they're turning red. Most people really feel empathy for that individual. And they don't wish a speaker ill will. And they really kind of feel the pain of the person up there who feels uncomfortable. So I think all speakers need to keep in mind that the audience wants you to succeed. The
that's what
audience does
they're
not want you
here.
to fail. Yeah, their
That's what
fear
they're
is
there
that
to
they're going to
listen to
laugh.
you.
Right. Their fear is that they'll laugh at me, but they don't want to laugh at you. You have to be a really unkind person to really get joy from somebody suffering, while they're presenting. That's a very interesting type of individual. And I don't think there are many of those in the world, quite honestly. I don't. I don't.
That's very optimistic of you. So thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Williams.
So some of the other techniques that I've definitely seen kind of working through the years is cognitive restructuring, which is changing the way you think. If I had $1 for every time a student came into my class and said, "Oh, Dr. Williams, I'm so nervous. I'm going to fail. I'm going to forget it all. I know it's going to be horrible." I would be a millionaire probably a few times over. So I would definitely give also the advice, besides obviously practicing with the notes, the second thing is to really only think positive thoughts. Instead of thinking, "I'm going to fail, I'm nervous," think, "I'm excited." Because your language will affect your thoughts and ultimately your behavior.
So I have heard this term manifestation for the past
Yes,
couple of months. So should
yes,
we only manifest good things before a
that's
public
right.
speaking? All right.
That's right.
Because I've heard some people say don't manifest the bad things, but I think we should focus on manifesting the good things. So we're
That's
excited
right.
about it. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I will do great. I will inform people. So those are very, very nice affirmative, thoughts.
Right. Right. And I think that definitely helps. I also think another psychological term, which is called systematic desensitization, which basically means little by little. So you're exposing yourself to an unpleasant stimuli little by little. So to give an analogy, if you have a fear of flying, an airplane, right? And you go to see a therapist. The therapist is not going to say, "Brilliant, there's a flight leaving for Hong Kong in an hour, let's go," right? They're going to gradually and systematically desensitize you to your fear. So, and I think that's more the instructor's role in my case, to make everybody comfortable with one another, do kind of small things for the getting up and make it fun. But for the speaker's role in that, they have got to seek out experiences where they are either performing, whether it's a musical instrument or a play or something like that. And if they have more performance experience, even playing in a sport that other people watch, the more performance experience you have, the more comfortable you will be speaking in public, for sure.
So talking about performances, is there like a variance between, performing, like doing a sport versus performing in a dance show versus giving a speech in class? Is there like a difference between, how much people get anxiety? Is there like a certain statistic, or is there any
Yeah,
difference? People do people get more nervous during sports than public speaking, or because
yeah,
they're still in front of many people, as you have just
right.
mentioned.
Public speaking is definitely number one. And the main difference between public speaking and something like sports or dancing is that those people are moving, which is helping them. Because as you probably know, when we get nervous, right, or scared, our body sends us a chemical called adrenaline. So the body's trying to do that to, really do you a solid and help you out, right? But if you don't channel that adrenaline correctly, it completely works against you. And if you want to know what that feeling feels like, think of the last time you had a nightmare and you woke up and you felt frozen and afraid. That was the adrenaline. Because in the nightmare state, your brain's not differentiating from what's real or anticipated, right? It only knows what your brain's thinking. So your brain's thinking in the dream that you're scared. So when we wake up from that dream, that nightmare, the reason we're paralyzed is because we haven't channeled the adrenaline. So when you're running on a field or you're dancing, you're channeling that adrenaline already. You see? And when speaking is pretty a stationary event. So you've got to do a lot of things to make that adrenaline work for you and not against you. I don't know if you've ever seen Amy Cuddy's TED Talk on nonverbal communication. She's a Harvard professor, and she found in her research, and this was so interesting, that the levels of cortisol, the stress hormone we all have, went down if people stood in a certain position for 2 minutes in silence. And at first, when I heard her, I said, that can't be true. And then I did it, and I really think it's true. And it's called power posturing. And anybody can find it if they look through TED Talks and look for Amy Cuddy, Cuddy. So you stand up and you extend your arms really high. And the second one, you put your fist on your hips and you stand that really tense way for 2 minutes, and your stress level will go down. It's absolutely amazing. So that helps move the adrenaline. Another thing that helps move the adrenaline, and everybody should do this before any speech ever. You ready? It's really simple, but it makes sense. You just shake your hands vigorously, 2 minutes before you give a speech. And then the adrenaline's moving around. It also will forestall handshaking. Have you ever seen that in people?
Yes, especially handshaking, and for some public speaking, when it is done with sitting down, I see lots of like leg shaking,
Yes,
lots of
same thing. Shake your
thumping.
legs. Same thing. Do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
because
Those are
that's
some
the
gestures
adrenaline.
that those are gestures that I immediately recognize that that person is
Yes,
anxious. So
yes,
knowing that you can use that actually, for your advantage instead of kind of
right.
against you to display that anxiety is, I think, definitely a
Yeah,
very clever way.
yeah. So shaking your hands, shaking your legs, doing power posturing. We also hear it nervousness in people's voices. Have you heard that
Mhm.
quivering? And that's the adrenaline too, kind of taking over your vocal folds. So it's the same, like, so do some vocal warm-ups, like people do before singing or before being in a play, and going for a walk, going for a run the day of your speech. All these things will help move that adrenaline and make it do its job. But if you don't do it, it won't do its job.
So Dr. Williams, I have a question. So as a,
Sure.
professor in the communication department, so I'm kind of wondering, so I'm taking media writing class this
Oh,
semester, a beautiful
great.
communication course, and we're learning about like the broadcast industry as well. So is there any like special tips and tricks that we can learn from like broadcast people or like anyone who is in like
Mm.
in the news field? How are they
Oh,
doing it?
interesting. Well, I think it's interesting. My husband works in the broadcast industry, honestly, in
Awesome.
radio. Yeah, he's a traffic announcer and does traffic reports on the radio. They don't have the feeling of being in front of an audience. And I, from his experience and his colleagues and friends, that I've known for years, I've interestingly never heard them talk on a day-to-day basis of their anxiety. Definitely when they started out. And one thing that I've heard, if you're broadcasting, is to pretend you're talking to a friend, even though you can't see that friend, maybe. Even if you're just looking right into the camera there, you pretend you're talking to a friend. And I think that really helps.
And using like a prompter. So you said that while we're practicing, we should only use
Mhm.
keywords or key
That's right.
phrases and not the whole speech at all. What
Ever.
about, does it help use a prompter for like, for more formal occasions, or does it actually not help?
I don't know. I think that would probably bother me, but I know they use them for TED Talks, TEDx
Mhm.
Talks. They use them all the time. So maybe in that venue, it might be good. But if you're going to use a prompter and you've never used one before, you have to practice because it'll be extremely unsettling if you don't know the pace of that prompter. And the problem with the prompter is that it doesn't allow for any variation in your speech whatsoever.
Definitely.
And I've really only seen them for TED Talks or people, on TV and the news. When people give speeches at conferences, I've never seen anybody use a prompter, honestly.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
I would like to ask, for the educators, I know our audience
Mhm.
is very young, but for the people maybe who want to go into the education field, how should they approach the students, especially with public speaking
Mm.
and, anxiety? Because I think, you know, one of my experiences, I feel comfortable because I know that my teachers in the past made me feel comfortable while giving a speech in front of my entire
Mhm.
class. So
Mhm.
some, we said lots of notes, lots of tips and tricks for the people who will do the public speaking. But what about instruct those public speaking, assignments?
Yeah. Well, I think that the first thing is to get a handle on what causes this anxiety, right, in students, just, because there's obviously a lot of reasons and explanations for it. And then make a very conscious effort to not have the student get up for the first time the day of the speech. You've got to do definite activities and get those students to know one another and feel comfortable with one another, know each other's names in the class so that when they get up, they've had maybe conversations with these people in the class and have them get up and do something very small. Like, hey, read these 3 things I have in the PowerPoint today. Just tell them what's up there. Or what I have my students do in the class all the time is I'll lecture for a few minutes and then I'll say, tell your neighbor what I just told you. And then they have to talk to different people in the class. Like establishing that atmosphere, I think, is crucial because you have to feel comfortable if you're beginning to learning public speaking.
Definitely. So, feeling comfortable and getting know.
Yes,
Again, people are afraid of what they don't know and what they're
that's
new
right.
to.
That's
So,
right.
I was thinking, what are some places that we're actually doing public speaking without the stage and like the classic public
Mm,
speaking environment? And I
yeah.
just first thought about giving a Starbucks order. So that's some place that I'm
Right.
still in front of people.
Right.
And, when I order, I think like everybody is going to hear me ordering. And what if I, say something wrong instead of a venti, I ask for, a small. So it's those, kind of moments. So do you think there are any moments
Mm.
like those where you're actually kind of doing public speaking without like the formal of what we actually like think about?
Well, I don't know if I would classify that as public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It is speaking in public, but I wouldn't say that it's, more traditional, like from a rhetorical perspective.
Definitely.
But I think even somebody just standing up maybe at a PTA meeting, right, and asking a question
Mhm.
that might be a better kind of
Definitely.
analogy, something we can all kind of relate to, standing up and asking a question at a meeting. I would definitely think that people will even have anxiety with that, quite honestly. Um, And I think a lot of it is that they're overthinking it. They're overthinking how other people are seeing them instead of just focusing on the actual act of asking the question or asking for the grande or the venti, right, at Starbucks. They have all this back talk just going in their head. Am I saying it loud enough? Are they going to understand me? And I think if people just eliminate all of that and just focus on the actual behavior of asking the question or doing the speech, they'll actually be a lot more relaxed. Like when you really think about public speaking, in my opinion, it comes down to a skill. It's just a learnable skill. Is everybody going to like it? No. Is everybody going to be great at it? No. But we can all learn skills, right? We can all learn skills. So one of my students who I had this semester was nervous about giving his speech. And I said, you have to think about public speaking is just making a lasagna. So just focus on putting all the ingredients in there. You're just making the lasagna. Just focus on making the lasagna and don't overthink it. And like we just have this there's just like this suffocating hyper awareness, I think, that we take with us everywhere we go, into Starbucks, into meetings, and we've just got to stop that because it really doesn't help us at all.
Definitely. And when you said that it is the skill that we can
Mm,
all learn to a certain degree,
right,
I just thought that it's not a talent like that you cannot even achieve in the future. So it's not like you're born
that's
with
right.
it, or if you're not born with it, you cannot achieve it in the
Yeah,
future. So it was a very,
yeah,
very nice comment about that, that
yeah,
there is still hope, even
yeah,
if you are not born with
yeah,
that public speaking,
yeah.
extrovertedness.
And but I don't think anybody's born with it, even if they're extroverted. So, fun fact, in eighth grade, I was nominated as the quietest girl in the eighth grade class. I didn't win. My friend won. Uh, so I went from being very, very quiet in middle school. And then in high school, I was in some plays, and then I really liked that. And then I was asked to be in the competitive speech team, and I really liked that. Like if somebody told me in eighth grade, you know what? By your junior year in high school, you're going to be winning trophies in public speaking events. I would have said absolutely not. So part of this public speaking journey and learning the skill is to really put yourself out there, you know? Put yourself out there for speaking, put yourself out there for performance, but also I would also suggest to all the listeners here, put yourself out for involvement in clubs and organizations. Put yourself out there for leadership roles where you're going to have to speak to people. Because let's face it, like the goal, it seems, of this group that you have is to really improve things, right? And if you look at the history of social movements, particularly, right, a lot of those social movements started with some pretty amazing speeches.
Definitely.
So learning this skill can only give you benefits, right? Like there's no drawbacks to learning it. Am I right?
Absolutely
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
So
So go ahead,
it is
please.
definitely a skill to learn. And what is the first step to learn this skill though? Just not
Ah,
overthink it,
yeah.
or what is that
Yeah,
one
well, I think,
step?
yeah, if I, the first thing I would say is don't overthink it.
Okay.
Okay. And then I would say if you're working with somebody, for this certain presentation, let's say in a college class, like for
Mhm.
example, definitely seek out that instructor, ask questions, meet with that instructor, right? That's it. The instructor's job is to meet with you and help you. And don't be hesitant to do that, first of all. And I think a lot of people are, they think they're bothering us or whatever, but you're not. So don't overthink it. Talk to the instructor. And then you've got to practice the right things in the right way, right? So there are some definite key elements of delivery that I would focus on. The first element is eye contact.
Okay.
Do not read your speech. If you read your speech, you will be bored and the audience will be bored. You will also talk faster at a lower volume with less expression.
Definitely, because it is totally
Yeah,
different from just reading
yes,
and then improvising as well.
that's right. And what I tell it in my class, well, I do fun. One of the listeners here has been in this class. So when I'm teaching all these delivery principles, I bring in some props and it's a lot of fun. But one of the things I really focus on with eye contact is that there's a lot of bad information with eye contact. Like, I don't know if you've heard this bad advice, like look over the heads of the audience. Have you ever heard that? Because a lot of people
I
have.
have heard it from a couple people, like it's just to
Yeah,
align the eyes, but
no, and it's totally wrong. I don't know how it started, and I don't know why it's still out there. It's bad advice. The only time you would do that is if you're speaking on stage. But I know very few people who are speaking on stage anytime soon. So it's really not very solid advice. And I've heard, well, look at their foreheads. No, that's not good either. I've heard, oh, look between their eyes. Nope, nope.
it is
And
called eye contact for a
yeah,
reason.
right. So what I tell my students, and I say it in a funny way in classes, your eyeballs should be looking at their eyeballs. And that's it. It's that simple. But it's actually the hardest thing to do in public speaking, to look at people's eyeballs, right? While you're talking. But that's the number one thing, because the rest will kind of follow, actually. Your
Okay.
rate, your volume, your expression will follow if you're looking at people and making it conversational.
It's going to be more easy because when I think about making a conversation, I think about talking to a friend, and we have mentioned
Right,
this. So
right,
talk to a friend. So it is much easier to see someone and look at them as other human beings who are just there to listen you instead
that's
of
right,
like kings and queens who will behead
right,
you if you make a
right.
mistake. So if you just see them as,
Exactly.
peers or anyone who's there to listen to you and kind of, I would say, humanize them, because
That's right.
I know that the people that I speak to sometimes, they are kind of very scared of their audience because they think that they will, insult them after it, or they will say
Right.
bad things after.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
humanize them. They're also human. They're just like
yeah.
you. They're here to listen to
Right,
you.
right. And I also think relating to that point for sure is that when an audience member feels that you've tried, that you've really tried your best to give a really good presentation, like they're okay with that. They're going to support you, and the audience wants you to succeed.
That is very encouraging. That is very, very
Yeah,
encouraging.
yeah,
Thank you so
yeah.
much, Dr. Williams. And
Oh, you're
before we end
welcome.
it,
Sure.
I have some ETalk special questions for you that,
Okay.
we ask at the end of each episode that, I know that our audience is delighted to know these, because we
Okay.
share it on social media as well. So
Okay.
number one will be your favorite color.
Purple, as you can see.
Purple.
And the
Awesome.
second favorite, green.
And I love that they're both displayed there. Number two will be three books that you would like to recommend to our audience.
Oh, I would say, and definitely related to my field for sure, are any books by Malcolm Gladwell.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if you've read his Blink, Outliers, books like that talk about perception, communication, leadership. I think he is an exceedingly astute writer and observant. So any books I would recommend by Malcolm Gladwell for sure.
All right, definitely. So thank you so much, Dr. Williams. And number three will be any movies that you would like to recommend to us.
Ooh. The first one that comes to mind actually related to this topic, and actually because I love the lead actor, is The King's Speech.
Okay.
Yes, which talks about the story about um, the King of England who had a speech impediment. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the film. Have you
I've
seen
seen the
it?
trailers and everything, but I will
Okay,
definitely
yeah.
watch it right after.
Oh, and talk about anxiety. This guy was speaking to the world, and the poor guy had a speech problem. And the all the things that the person that he worked with that told him to help him overcome this, I just thought was so touching and moving and just so true of the really high levels of anxiety that many people experience.
Yeah. So we will definitely like link it down below that
Yes.
that is we should do like a ETalks movie night session where we watch it and just learn about it. That's awesome.
Yes,
And last
yes.
but not least,
Uh-huh.
your thoughts and feelings about art, any type of art. I know you kind of mentioned like performance arts, but any type of
Right.
art that you would like to say a couple words about.
Well, I guess performance art. As I mentioned before, I think it's really good that we seek out all different types of performance. And I definitely see public speaking related to public singing in choirs, or if you're a soloist. I also think that public speaking can be really improved by performing in plays and performing in musicals. So I would definitely suggest, like, to your listeners, to, even if you don't have the guts to do it yourself, right? Go and listen to a soloist sing. Go see a choir perform. Go see plays and go see musicals, and just be a part and feel those vibes, you know, of the performers. And I really think, honestly, that it will help you. I really do.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for
You're
tuning in today.
welcome.
Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and sharing wonderful, wonderful facts. I think we learned so much from, about public speaking. I know that our audience learned so much, and I would like to thank our audience for tuning in today and listening to this very special topic. I hope you guys learned something. And next time when you're in a public speaking situation, make sure to not overthink and look into people's eyes. Thank you so much, everyone. Make sure to subscribe, like, and see you next week.